Hello, everybody. Welcome back for video 20 in this set of videos. This is actually preparation for a lecture for um, this thing I'm doing later this summer with high schoolers. I just want to get everything ready in advance and making these videos, editing my lecture plan. I decided not to delete them and just share them on YouTube in case other people find them helpful. But general game development, we're using the Godot game engine, but I'm trying to generalize it. And next up is something that I talked about much earlier, way back. If you've been watching the videos, an early video when we were making the landscape, you might remember I was very careful to leave a big divot here because I wanted like a lake or something um, to build use shaders with, which as opposed to like just the color materials, the materials that basically just have color like we've seen so far. Uh, a shader would be where we actually go and start coding that. So I'm going to move my character down here uh, in that area that where there was left a big divot to fill with water at some point. I think it was over here. Where'd the character go? That way we can see stuff. Oh yeah, this little area down here looks like it'd be a nice little spot to turn into a lake with the mesh showing. Well, actually, I could probably turn the mesh off. If I just run it, it will hide that glider. So over here, we've got this nice little thing. Oh yeah, I did. So we got a nice little divot here. That seems like it'd make a nice little spot for, uh, could be used like a lake. I did turn down the speed the, uh, on the passage of time, which, I did that between videos, so I'll point it out real quick. If I come back over to scripts, in the sun script, on Earth, it moves 360 degrees in 24 hours. Uh, didn't have to look those numbers up or anything. So I just took 360 degrees divided by 24 hours divided by 3,600 seconds per hour. And this is the rate, uh, this is the angle that shadows should be changing. Since we're in a simulation and games are going to run a little bit quicker, I went with, I think 10 times faster. Yeah. I just multiplied that by 10 and went with a nice small one. And I ran it for a few minutes. It looked okay. So I went with that. So now on to the lake thing. So I left this spot here for it, and we'll need to code a shader. This might take a couple videos. There's um, about 20 lines of code or so to write to introduce those. I'm going to start by adding a plane in here. So uh, I'm just going to do it right here in Spot. Earlier we created a new scene, then built everything, then brought it in. There is a thing where once we set things up, if we right click here in Godot, we can, after we make it, we can save it as a scene. So I'm just going to make it right here so I can see it against other things and then save it as its own scene later. So I want to make need to insert a mesh to use for the water. So just like our 3D models, we set up the mesh. So we'll just add a mesh right in here. Um, I don't think this is going to need a body or anything. Could go ahead and edit my own, but we definitely want uh, the setup for it. So over here in the inspector panel with that selected, we can choose different sizes. And for water in a lake, we're just going to look at it that from the top. So a plain mesh will work. Then we need to set up the size. Um, I move this over here. So we can see it's really small right now. And if over in the inspector, if you click on that plane, you get a bunch of options about it, including the size. So let's say which direction is which at. Okay, so and the X lines up, and I'm guessing the Z here lines up with, or the Y here lines up with the Z there, yeah. So just doing a couple big numbers to see what it would be. Okay, Looks like 50 is wide enough. How long is this thing? Let's try 200. Looks like it worked. Maybe I can move it down just a little. Oh, not that far down. And I'll move it up and down until I find a nice little spot where the water, the edges look somewhat natural. I guess it's kind of rounded, but that'll give us our plane. So now we want to add a material to it. You can see right now it's just kind of reflecting the sky. It just reflects whatever color the sky is. So at night it'll look black. But we can do better than that and try to make it look like water. In particular, the ripples on water is what I was wanting to look at as an introduction to shaders. So if we uh, click on it, look at there's all the size options. You can make little adjustments there. Or this second option here, surface material override. So we can click on here and create a new material, which is kind of like what we did in Blender. We set that up and there was just a bunch of things will show up in the inspector panel we can adjust, or a new shader material would be the one that we actually go over in code. So we'll click that, it'll fill in a little dot, it puts a material there, but we haven't actually set it up as a shader yet. So if we click on that, down here you'll see a spot again for a shader. So we'll click here and create a new shader. And we need to give it a name and a place to store it, because just like our the script we put on a player, this is kind of a script for our materials. So I'll come over here and store it in this materials folder. Um, Water is probably a good name for it. At least that's what we're making. And we'll also make a sky one later. You can see there's a default template, not really a whole lot of options to choose from there. You kind of have to make your own shader templates. So uh, this would probably be a good one to turn into a water template that you can customize for things if you're going to be making a lot of games. Inherit, you can see we have several options to start with. For water, we'll just go with the spatial shader. It's something taking up space and it is of type shader. And when we hit create, it should show up down here. Here's our shader editor. Oh, I guess I have to come over here and double click on it in the folder. There we go. Oh, I was expecting two things in here. Let me add another function. Void vertex. I'm not actually going to use this one. I'm only going to use the one up here. Uh, so it's based on OpenGL. You'll notice it's definitely not the same language we were scripting in for our character. We have curly braces and semicolons. OpenGL is pretty much the standard for making shaders. So it's very consistent. You will find lots and lots of resources to get started. I'm just going to go through a quick one and use it here in the game engine and kind of see what's going on with them. So vertex, if you remember on our mesh when we were looking at stuff in Blender, we put a whole bunch of basically dots in space and then called those vertices, and connected those dots with edges. And then when we had a whole edges went all the way around to fill in a shape, we put a face there. So we can control apply things to all the vertexes or all the vertexes in between, or fragment will apply to the entire shape at once. So we want to do stuff for the entire shape. And I guess the first thing would be to set up a color. It's reflecting the sky color, which looks about right for water, but we're going to change that sky color before long. That was just a quick filler. So I'll expand the mesh instance again. So one thing, just like we saw in our script up here, when we want it to show up in the panel over here, we would export it from this script. Our keyword for that in the shader is going to be uniform. So if we make a uniform vector3, and oh, oops, I need to give it a name. I'll call it watercolor. and then a colon, and I want that to be source color. So save that. And it happened really quick, but there's a new little section over here in our inspector about the shader. If you're not seeing all this, make sure the mesh instance is created. And then under surface material override, click on that. And we should now have this resource, oh, not resource, shader parameters with that watercolor that we just added. So notice snake case here in the editor showed up as uh, words separated with capital letters here, capitalized with a space instead of a semicolon when it reformatted for the inspector. And so that assigns a color, but then we have to come down and assign it in our code. So there's different words for the color is referred to as an albedo. The albedo of it. What color is it? So we can set that value we just assigned to this, and we are in a language that uses semicolons. So you see, that's basically what we have to do. We have to set up our values, and if we make them uniform, they'll show up in the inspector so that we'll have all those options like we're used to, the sliders. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do one where there's like here, all we can do is type the number, but on some of them, I think the transform works. We can click and drag, and I was going to show you how to do the click and drag thing, and like the source color when it's built in. So just uniform means it shows up there. Vector 3 is the type, and just like a variable, we're going to call it watercolor, and source color is what we're assigning to it, and that puts the thing over here. So that's the first couple steps on making a water shader, but it gave us a color for water, but water should have a bunch of waves on the top. So that's really what I wanted to do. So we'll look at that in the next video because it looks like we're past 12 minutes already. And this is how we code our materials and get control over them. And we get a lot more control writing the code for it. But I wanted to include that in these, these videos are for a summer camp with high schoolers later this summer. And the high schoolers that are going to be there are kind of serious about game development. So I wanted to show them this, not just do a quick pass at materials. I wanted to get them started actually coding their shaders. So we'll look at how to add some waves to this water in the next video and a couple more of the useful things for when it shows up here so that we have more than just type in a number sort of things. I'll see you in the next video.